Okay, so I'll do roll call. Michael Pearson,
Present.
Gilbert,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
Gigi,
Here.
Stephanie,
Here.
Cheryl,
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Kiki,
Hi, I'm here.
Is there a member here that I did not call? Ronell, did I call you?
No, but I'm here though.
Okay, Ronell. So, Dan, did I call your name?
No, I'm representing the district attorney's office.
Okay, all right. And is there anyone else on the board that I did not call that is present?
Hey, so Monique, this is Melvin Russell, and I'll be the proxy for Issa, for Chief Ingram Cross.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Monique, I don't think you officially called me, but maybe you counted me as present.
Okay, all right. Ellen, right? That Ellen? Yes.
You got it.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry, I am trying to look at these two screens and determine who the members are. So did all of the members confirm that they're present? I see Kira, but I'm not sure, is Kira a member or is she a proxy?
Kira's a proxy.
Okay, all right. So all of the members are present and we can start the meeting with welcome and introductions. So if you're not a member of the Our Job, you are welcome to introduce yourself in the chat. And if there are any announcements from the members. Okay, seeing none. Are there any public comments not on this agenda that you would like to announce? Okay, seeing none.
Monique, I do see a couple hands raised there.
Oh, okay, okay, thank
Monique,
you. So
yeah.
3.
Just in order, and I'll help you out here. We have Melvin Willis, Mr. Phil Arnold, and Jane Corrent.
And those are the hands raised?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, Mr. Melvin Arnold, you may speak.
Hello, good afternoon, Racial Justice Oversight Body. My name's Melvin Willis. I'm ACE organizer, also with the Racial Justice Coalition, and in my individual capacity, I'm a Richmond City Council member. I wanted to call in today, and please let me know when my time's up so I don't get lost in my words. I did want to call in today because I understand that in previous meetings, the issue of having a community oversight board for the sheriff's department has been a part of the conversation, but it seems like from my understanding here from third-hand information, it seems like in a sense, there's this false sense that there's more community trust between the sheriff's department and members of the community, but from folks that I work with, we're still concerned about there not being any type of oversight with subpoena powers, especially when we hear about police-involved shooting, continued coordination with ICE, and community members don't really have an outlet or say outside of board of supervisors or meetings like this, or, it seems very isolating to deal with these issues alone if you're somebody who is a victim of a deputy who's making a bad name for the department. I just wanted to call in because I wanted to ensure that the board that this is something that still matters to the community, and it is a conversation that I hope can continue to have at this board so we can take it seriously and come up with real recommendations to put in front of the board of supervisors on getting a sheriff oversight process, and let it be at the discretion of the board to decide whether or not to strike it down, because we've had a few elections and the dynamics and narratives have changed since we first talked about this few years back. So I'll end my time right there, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this important issue, and have a great day.
Thank you. The next hand is Phil Arnold.
Alrighty, thank you very much. My name is Phil Arnold. I'm representing my heart and my community today as a septuagenarian African-American male. And what that means is I have lived experience from just my age alone and some of the things that I've lived through from a racial profiling standpoint and just getting through to where I am in my life today. Who am I? I've served the county on the Juvenile Justice Commission many years ago in the early 90s with my friend Orrin Allen, and I've served 11 years on the Sheriff's Inmate Welfare Fund at the invitation of Sheriff Warren Roop before he retired. I've also served 9.5 years as the chairperson of the Contra Costa County Board of Parole, and I've been actively involved with community for over 3 decades, and I've lived experience to show from a position of knowledge and understanding. I am strongly encouraging that you do whatever you can to put in place a sheriff's oversight for the protection of the community, for the protection of the sheriff's department, protection of anyone that lives and works in Contra Costa County. As you know, we just finished a couple of years ago a Contra Costa County Department of Justice consent decree that lasted 38 years for the alleged discriminatory practices of the hiring and promoting of females first and minorities second. If you look at the number of department heads that we have now, that hiring, outreach, and oversight committee did its job by the sheer number of females that we have as department heads. Some may believe that oversight committees fundamentally do nothing. I disagree. When I served in the military, I welcomed the opportunity to be inspected because the inspection meant I was battle ready and that everything was proper and in order and buttoned down. So today, again, I want to strongly recommend that we take a serious look and go ahead and move forward with Sheriff's Oversight Committee as an asset to the county and to the sheriff and to our constituents. We owe it to our constituents, but also to you, to foster a community mental health of the African Americans who are, by your own department and data, have shown to be the most harmed population and underserved throughout the pandemic and before. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. The next person is Jane Current.
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today, especially in the company of the last 2 speakers who have really served this community for many years. And I am a member of the Racial Justice Coalition, as well as Surge, Contra Costa. And I know that this community, when it first started advocating for the Racial Justice Task Force, I don't know, was that 5 years ago? Melvin, you could correct me. It certainly has been some time. There were proposals. The one that asked for the Sheriff's Oversight Board on the part of the community was not endorsed by the supervisors. on the basis of the fact that there would be no, okay, Melvin, 6 or 7 years ago, thank you. So yes, this has been an issue that has been on the forefront of the community's mind for some time. And at the time that the supervisors did not endorse the recommendation of that original task force for the oversight board, the argument from legal counsel was that there was nothing in place in the state that would give that board some subpoena power, which would in turn give it some real meaning. Well, as we all know, just 2 years ago, there was a bill passed and signed by the governor allowing communities and municipalities to establish such boards, and some have. So I don't want to go over again the arguments, because you heard them beautifully stated by the previous 2 speakers, but this is a need, and this is something, there's a lot of history going back to when we had detainees from ICE in our jails who were being mistreated, along with all others who have stories they have shared over and over again of mistreatment in our jails, mistreatment on our streets. So I just want to thank you for the work you've done so far. I know that there are going to be some very interesting reports coming on, and the committees of this group work very, very hard. And I want to thank you, but I want to add my voice that this is a need and this should not be dropped. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. The next speaker is Stacy Frederick.
Hi there. I'll make this fairly quick. So my name is Stacy Frederick. I've lived in Richmond a number of years now. My normal day job is that I work at UC Berkeley doing fire science and fire ecology. And I have seen just the real need and the effectiveness that oversight community members like or groups like this could have. And so I just want to echo my support. And I, again, will not, like the previous comments were just lots of nodding going on for me. And I just thank everyone for their words, and just want to add my own vote that we should have a community oversight board for our sheriff department. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Elsie Mills.
Hi, thank you. I live in Concord, and I echo everything that's been said, but I guess I'm just really confused. We've been talking about this since 2017. And then we formed the oversight body, this racial justice oversight body, and it was expected that it was the mechanism to get move forward the oversight. And this committee has been meeting, people are working hard. But when we separate it into 3 subcommittees, I'm not sure which subcommittee should be moving this along, but it's not getting moved along. I certainly think this body is the one to take responsibility for it, but I read the minutes and I come to the meetings off and on, and I don't see any progress. So it's a systemic issue, an organizational issue. I don't know. I guess I'm protesting that it's not moving along, that the community has shared with the Board of Supervisors and this particular body to get this done, and no one is moving it along. And I'm very disheartened, and I'm hoping at least during the public comment, and then the members of this body take responsibility and move this along. And I know many of you have, but I'm frustrated that nothing's happening. So thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Sue Brandy. Did Sue Brandy speak? Is she still on the call? Okay, so
Yeah, she's right there.
Sue, did you have your hand up to speak?
She dropped off accidentally.
Okay. So Stephanie, you're next.
She's still here. I think she's struggling, trying to get off of.
She can come back. She can come back in.
Yes, she can come back after Stephanie.
Hi, yeah, my name is Stephanie Taddeo. I live in Danville. I've been in the Bay Area for about 10 years and kind of new to all of this local governance and trying to be more involved and pay attention. And I have to say, I agree with some of the previous speakers. All of this has been laid out eloquently, and I'm joining today to add my voice of support of Sheriff Oversight. Just looking at the organizational chart of the county, you just see there, just in very basic terms, that there's really no one for the sheriff to answer to other than the budget process with the Board of Supervisors. And I just don't think that's good enough. I think AB 1608 is a step in the right direction, and hopefully that gets passed, where the duties of the sheriff and coroner are now separated. I just think it's way too much authority for one individual or governing body. I know I have friends that live in San Ramon, and with their police department, that's more of a individual or municipal department. They have, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 Wednesdays a month, they meet with the community members, they do coffees. After the 2 tragedies that occurred here in Danville by Officer Hall, many of us have spoken up, and we want town halls, we want 2-way communication. We don't want to just be talked at. So I'm doing my best to put it in very plain terms that I think Sheriff Oversight, if there's not more initiative on the sheriff's part to reach out to the community, which I'm not seeing, then I think there's absolutely is a serious need for oversight. And I heard somebody say earlier, it's for everybody's benefit. It's for officers that, are trying their best to do the right thing. It's overall a win-win. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you. Sue, you can speak now.
Thank you. I apologize. I was having a problem finding my mute button. I'm a private citizen. I belong to a nonpartisan group in the community, but I'm not authorized directly to speak for them, so I won't. I've worked for many years with police and sheriff's department in another county, but I responded to critical incidences, to line of duty deaths, to officer involved shootings, as well as working with individual officers. Most of these officers were good men and women. They took their jobs of protecting the community very seriously. They were compassionate human beings. There were, however, officers that did not meet this description. There were, we see a department that is struggling to meet these kinds of objectives, and people who aren't a credit to the department and to the force. I believe the Citizens Oversight Committee would benefit the department and the officers, as someone else had said earlier, who value the reputation of themselves and the department. Every one of the officers I spoke to wanted to go home to his or her family at the end of their shift, but they didn't want to bring harm to anyone if they could avoid it. And so I think the Oversight Committee will benefit those officers who are doing the right thing and strengthen the sheriff department. And I strongly support everything that everybody else has said. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker is OG.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm OG Strogatz, and I live in unincorporated Walnut Creek. And I would just like to express my support for the statements of previous speakers in favor of establishing a sheriff's oversight board. Just building on what others have said, most recently in my own neighborhood, just a few houses down from my home on July 28th, a week ago, here in unincorporated Walnut Creek, there was an incident. I observed down the street multiple vehicles from the sheriff's office, multiple law enforcement personnel, helicopters hovering over my neighborhood. No complete accounting of this incident has yet come to my attention, and my understanding is that it involved a young man in mental health crisis. And it raises concerns with me about the criminalization of mental illness. So I am concerned. It's the sort of incident that I really feel a citizens oversight board looking at the work of the sheriff's office. Let's have a full accounting of the facts and let's understand what took place, why it took place, what we all can learn from it. So I just offer that as a recent example of the imperative to establish a sheriff's oversight board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll defer to Ellen. There are actually two more hands, Ellen, so I'll defer to you if we will continue with the public comments.
Yeah, I think we should take all of the public comment for those.
Okay.
That thanks.
All right, so the next person is Jan Warren.
Hi, Jan Warren, live in Walnut Creek and a member of Surge Contra Costa, and I will just echo, I support the statements made today to have oversight of our sheriff. The only thing I'll add is that it's best to have these programs in place before something else goes wrong. And then we're trying to scramble we need to have it. And if not, if we don't need it, okay, but likely we will. The past shows that we will, and I support this.
Thank you. And the final speaker is Elsa Stevens.
Hi, this is Elsa Stevens. On behalf of ACE, I have attended Contra Costa Council meetings. One time I was there from 9 in the morning and I was not able to speak until midnight. That's the level of commitment I had to speak that day. If you're worried about the progress being made in this issue, have you met our council, our board of supervisors? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have.
So Ellen, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Ellen McDonald, public defender, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Racial Justice Oversight Body. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for the engaged and robust public comment this afternoon. We are going to move on to approval of the record of actions from the May 5th quarterly meeting. So if everyone can review that, if you haven't had a chance to do so, it's on pages 3 through 6 of the agenda. I'll just pause for a minute to allow a little bit of time to do that. And Monique, can you remind me, should I take public comment on this item now or after I ask for a vote?
So you'll ask for the vote before you take the, you'll ask for the public comment prior to the vote.
Thank you. And so is there any public comment on the record of action from the May 5th, 2022 quarterly meeting? And after this, I'll take any comment from the oversight body. Any public comment first? Scrolling for hands, not seeing any public comment. Is there anyone on the Racial Justice Oversight Body that wishes to be heard about the record of action from the May 5th quarterly meeting? Any edits, corrections, or comments? Not seeing any. Is there anyone who has a motion on the oversight body?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
A second.
Okay, motion from Jeff and second from Shayla. Thank you. And Monique, did you want to take the vote?
Yes, I'll do the roll call for the vote. Melvin?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Gilbert?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Shayla?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'm not sure if Marcus Walton is here for Lynn Mackey.
I am, and
Okay.
I will abstain.
Okay. And then Stephanie?
Yes.
Gigi?
Yes.
And I am not sure who else is here.
This is Jeff. I'll vote yes.
Jeff, okay, Jeff. And then
Michael,
Michael,
I'll abstain.
okay,
Ronell, yes.
okay. And Kiki,
I believe that Mr. Russell is here on behalf of the chief, so I'm not.
okay, okay. So, the motion passes. We have 2 abstentions and, then yes votes, so it passes.
Thank you so much, Monique. And now we're going to move on to item 4, which is receiving reports from our 3 active and engaged subcommittees. And what I'd like to do is take all 3 reports, then we'll take any comments from members of the Racial Justice Oversight Body, and then we'll take public comment on those 3 reports. And so the first of those is going to be a report from the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee, and Jeff Landau is going to present that.
Thanks, Ellen. And hi, everyone. Glad to be with you again, as always. And I appreciate having the report up here on the shared screen. So I'll just briefly first start off by recognizing that federal charges are being brought against the officers who had killed Breonna Taylor. And I think in terms of our national consciousness and how that may play out into our local call for accountability, I just wanted to lift that up as recent news and a reminder and for all of us in the importance of accountability and not leaving to just self-supervision, the concepts we've been talking about, the importance of having oversight. That's another situation that reminds me, and I thought I would take the moment to lift up before I go to the rest of this report, and can say that recent meetings have involved for our Community Engagement Funding Subcommittee discussion of what are the ways that we can most engage members of our community to participate, the timing of our meetings, the location, the way that we have it, virtual versus in person, and juggling these factors. There's been robust discussion at recent meetings about our intentions as the subcommittee. Are we wanting to have as much public participation in those subcommittee meetings as possible? Or are we considering the representatives who are in the community seats as distilling the public comment, or those are the vehicles? So I think it's been important for us to have those discussions to remind ourselves of what are we seeking to do. And when we have our meetings during the business hours as we do, and we have them remotely as we are, that's considering those factors. And I suppose I would invite the other subcommittees to have similar considerations. Is there the open, meaningful opportunity for community members to participate in the discussions? So I think ultimately we've left it to maintaining our current times because we do have our institutional stakeholders, persons that are working during, this is part of their workday, and then others who are not. So that said, it's given us certainly encouragement internally to be reaching out more than we have historically. There's always more to be done with that, so that if the times are inconvenient or imperfect, at least we'll make sure that persons are aware of the opportunities to engage and that what we're doing, and make sure that we remain informed by the current opinion of our stakeholders, of our community members, and that we're not only grounded in the recommendations from years past, while those are our anchor, that we're evolving with and responding to our community. I'll also just bring up that we are continuing to learn to make development on our community capacity fund or initiative as we're expanding even the concept of what that would be. And would it only be funding, or as we're expanding now to more technical assistance, to have a educational cohort, really having this to be more of community plus education plus funding. And in that, we're looking at local models, including the AB 109 Contra Costa County recent initiative, that fund, and what we might consider as a launching point, knowing that what we're intending is something broader and having additional elements, but at least that's an important beginning point for us. And then I would raise up the actions requested of the full RJOB to discuss next steps to implement our vote and our recommendation on August 5th of last year. And I have the text that's there. It's just reminding us that, of course, we did have the recommendation of the Racial Justice Task Force back in 2018 after our creation in 2016, and that included the recommendation of the task force to have sheriff oversight, which was not then approved by the supervisors in 2018. We continued on in this process, and as several speakers that we heard from public at the beginning have discussed, that the community has continued to call for it, and we've observed that, received that input in our community engagement and funding subcommittee since the creation of that subcommittee of the oversight body, and that we had a vote, this renewed consideration after the law made clear that there is the authority to have community oversight, including subpoena power. So it was our vote on August 5th of 2021, the text you see there, to create a sheriff oversight body, or board rather, and we cite the specific code section 25303.7, and to come back to us. Now, my very short summary, and I'm being respectful of the other subcommittees and times, is that this was referred to the Public Protection Committee, that there was discussion and Public Protection Committee meeting in April, as well as in May. I believe that the June meeting was canceled, July was not scheduled, and that August will be the next Public Protection Committee meeting. And right, we voted on it in August of 2021, and then it was referred there. My sense from those meetings, and inviting others to have their input on what had occurred, is that the proposal that we had made, which was specific about a sheriff oversight board and not a proposal of self-reporting, that's morphed into the concept of self-reporting from the sheriff. And the sheriff would provide information that's requested by the Public Protection Committee or the Board of Supervisors at large, and that those would be provided to the community at intervals. But that is self-reporting, and that is not oversight in the form that we talked specifically in the section that we articulated in our recommendation. So I bring this to our group with concern that our proposal is not moving forward, and that an alternative proposal is what's in place, and that I propose that perhaps it's appropriate to have a delegation, members of this group, to come to the Public Protection Committee meeting and to discuss the differences that we see, the important distinctions between having self-reporting and an oversight board that we had recommended, and that several of us would attend the upcoming Public Protection Committee meeting. And I'm bringing this to this group, informed by our subcommittee, and also wanting to take a temperature check, so to speak, to say, before we are to go there, am I right in understanding that this group is not satisfied in having an alternative self-reporting as opposed to oversight with the subpoena power that we talked about, and that's community acting as supervision. So I provide all of that as background on what we have been doing and the specific ask. We've heard now from community members in our public comment, but invite others if they have members of our oversight body to speak to if this is a shared concern, the status quo, and what we might do moving forward. So thanks for the opportunity to report back on our subcommittee work.
Thank you, Jeff. And I know I said that I would take all 3 reports and then take public comment and comments from our job members, but I'd like to actually pause now and take comments from the Racial Justice Oversight Body members, just given that what Jeff is sort of presenting to the group, I think is a really big bucket question. And we do have so much engagement from the community today with many folks speaking in public comment. So I would just open it up now for those on the Racial Justice Oversight Body. But I would first just like to say I really appreciate the work of the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee. And I really appreciate the level of engagement and presence here today from the community. I think it's a very robust turnout, and there's been a lot of folks really looking at this work, engaged in this work, and passionate about moving it forward. So I'll go ahead. I think I saw your hand first, Gigi.
Stephanie was first.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Jeff, and the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee for all of the work that you all have been doing. First, with overall community engagement, you know, that it has been something that we've struggled with since the very beginning. I know that, you know, we're still doing the Zoom meetings, but I do think that we should be looking at how do we create other opportunities to provide feedback of what's happening on this body and to get feedback from members in the community. And that may look like, you know, we used to have different community meetings in different parts of the county. And so revisiting what that could potentially look like on a more ongoing basis at different points throughout the year. And also with the Sheriff Oversight Body, I mean, I haven't changed at all. I still agree that we need to have a Sheriff Oversight Body. We've been talking about it since the task force days and through changing to the Oversight Body. And I mean, the community has been bringing it up from the very beginning. And so I do think that we need to move on this and listen to the community.
Thank you, Stephanie. Gigi?
Okay, so first around community engagement, I do think that it's really important to hold meetings where the vast majority of individuals from the community can attend. But first they have to know about the meeting. And it's my first meeting as an official member, and I did not know that this racial justice community engagement and funding, which is really important to me, even existed. So might need to have an orientation for even the members about the committees and what they can participate in. And I would view myself as a cultural broker. I applied in the role of faith because I have connection with other faith leaders where this is an important topic for them. So I would go back and gain input from them and also invite them to the meetings, right? Because I carry a particular lived experience, but I don't pretend to carry the experience for all people. And around, of course, the Sheriff Oversight, that was very horrendous, OG, what happened on Friday and in Walnut Creek. I worked with the mom. I tried to make contact over the weekend with the sheriff department because here's a young man, 30 years old, who'd been shot with rubber bullets in the same city that terrorized us all in with Miles Hall killing. And then I can't get answers, and she can't go see her son. He was initially charged with a crime, and then they released that. So I think we have a lot of work to do around oversight and getting answers immediately. I was shocked that this actual group ever met because I have not seen a lot of progress made in the jails for people from my community since this started. So I'm hoping I'm joining a group of individuals where there's going to be not just words, but action, and we start seeing opportunities for us to reduce the glaring disparities we see for primarily African Americans and then Latinx community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. And I'll just throw out there that what you just flagged is something we talked about in planning for today's meeting, was how do we onboard new members, ensure there's an orientation, and that folks have a good sense of the lay of land, the past work, the breadth of the work, opportunities to get involved, so that we can all be conducting really effective outreach as our job members. So a little bit later in the agenda, under item 7, we are going to talk about new member orientation, which is exactly what you mentioned. So thank you. And I see, I apologize, guys. I don't know who was next, but I see Ronell's hand up and he's on my first on my screen. So I'll let him go.
Yeah, just echoing the other comments. Just wanted to say that, yeah, definitely got to have oversight. One thing about this county, it has been able to navigate and maneuver at the sheriff department without a lot of checks and balances. So I think that's an issue for any entity, for the most part, that has that much power. So something has to be, done. Also, the community engagement, definitely. Getting back out there with the public and making sure the connection is made, and that folks who have a voice know that they have a platform and a channel to voice that opinion, to be engaged and to, be included in what's going on in our county. So that is critical as well. And, I am from, formerly incarcerated and all that stuff. And it's just what you see, is so commonplace and so familiar. For me, I'm removed from the system for quite some time, 30 years, without any police contact, 30 years. And I was a career criminal from 11 years old on up. And so, but what happens out there, things are happening in split seconds, but there's many ways I feel personally that, law enforcement can make better decisions. They have a lot of training, they have a lot of resources, and there are times when, they need to do what they need to do and to be safe. But then there's times where they make decisions that are extremely poor, just like me, myself, when I was a criminal, I made poor decisions, but I'm making better decisions now. So I think we all can make better decisions, and we can help them do that with oversight. Oversight that makes people accountable. When you're accountable and you know that somebody's watching, a lot of times you have to think things through and process what you're doing. So, but if you don't, you have no checks and balances, you make moves, the way you want. So I agree with many members of the committee and the public about what needs to be done. And then, some expedition as on our part as well. We need to do all that we can as fast as we can, proceeding with caution, and and also, making sure we're doing things right, but doing things. We definitely got to get to that point so that we can make sure that the public knows that we're doing all we can, and that we're concerned about their welfare and ours as well, because we are members of the community as well. So I live in this county, and I'm concerned about all of the citizens. So, but thank you, and I'll move on.
Thank you, Ronell. And then I see Michael's hand is up as well.
I'd like to thank the members of the public for showing up today. It was like a year ago that we took a vote on this, and we've been over this already. We had a very heated discussion about this issue. There was overwhelming support for this. And part of our task from the Board of Supervisors, one is to research, racial inequalities and do the research. But our second task is to actually plan and oversee the implementation of the measures that we need to do to make changes. And I'm disappointed with the Protection Committee that now it's stalled. Now we're back to square one, And I believe all this was started well before my time back in 2016 with the original mandate of creating this task force, this body to do exactly what we did. And now we're kind of running into a brick wall. So at this point, I think we do need to figure out our next steps of showing up at the protection committee meetings and our next steps, because we've already voted for this. We've already decided to send our recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and our members want a oversight committee. So I think it's in the county's best interest. And I'm highly disappointed in the stalling, which was part of our conversation last year when we voted for this, about words that we were coming up with a lot of research, a lot of words were being thrown around, but there was very little action. I've been disappointed in the lack of action. We can plan and research all we want, but if we don't put in specific policies and implement specific things that we need to have done, a plan in place, we're not going to go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been pointed out to me, this is actually on the agenda today for a community engagement and funding subcommittee update. So I understand part of that was the community's engagement around this piece or this topic, but I imagine a little later in our agenda when we're talking about updates from the PPC and the IOC meetings that it might be a space for the members to discuss kind of moving forward some of these pieces that are part of our work as well. But with that said, I see Cheryl and then Jill, did you have something you wanted to say now, or did you want to wait for public comment?
Cheryl, go ahead, and then I'll speak.
Oh, gracious, Miss Jill. Good afternoon. So a couple things. I've not been shy about my feelings about the Sheriff Oversight Committee. Thank you, Michael, sir, about phrasing it that way. I mean, we've gone around and around about this. It's enough talking. We just need to get it done. We have, I think we've beat this horse enough times. I do want to address this thing about the community engagement subcommittee. We've for those who were not in attendance at the last CEF meeting, I think that we need to properly and Jeff, maybe you can talk to this. We need to properly set the expectations of what the subcommittees are. The subcommittees is where we get work done, and the community is invited to attend those meetings. That is not and even though it's a public meeting, but it is not a meeting where you're actually, these are work meetings. This is not like the meeting where you're talking to the community about these things. Those meetings where we're planning on how can we better involve the community and better make sure the community knows what's going on. We had a long discussion about this because we are using a lot of staff and county union employee time during that time period. So while it is very important that we try and have meetings that are open and accessible to the public, we also have to understand that a lot of county employees are being told to come to these meetings and are supporting the RJOB in that way. So we have to there's a delicate balance there between saying you need to have a meeting at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when the public can be there, but you also have to, but you're forcing employees to work on their own time, or that they're not getting paid overtime for. So these are structural administrative meetings that many of us are also volunteering, but we can't force county employees to volunteer more than what they're already being told as part of their jobs. So these are administrative subcommittee meetings. In those meetings is when we should be talking about how do we have meetings, how do we have town hall meetings, how do we have public so-called listening session meetings that are accessible to the public to let them know about what we did in data, subcommittee and what are we doing with the data and what this data is informing us so that we can make better decisions about this very subject here about sheriff oversight. And how do we move forward? How does the community want us to move forward? And how do we take that information back to the Board of Supervisors to let them know this is not anecdotal. This is not something that only a handful of us want to see. This is what your constituency is telling you that you need to move forward on. That is different than the administrative, where we figure out the who, what, when, where, how. That's what we're doing in subcommittee. As we do in the diversion committee, we're not inviting in the diversion subcommittee, we're not inviting the whole public to help us determine the definition of diversion. There's a subcommittee of us doing it. And even in that subcommittee, there's a subcommittee. So we don't need, 100 people trying to figure that out. There are subject matter experts within the subcommittee who are doing the work and bringing it back to subcommittee. And then we come back with a recommendation for the full body, and then the full body goes. Now, in those subcommittees, the public is welcome. And then we open up to the public so the public can. That's the way any general body works. I welcome anybody else to either add to it or tell me that I got something wrong here. But I do think we need to make sure that we are properly setting expectation for the public participation and not saying that these meetings are supposed to be held when it's most convenient to the public, rather than doing the work that we're trying to do to make sure that we are closing these gaps that we are seeing and what our charge is from the council. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jill?
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. I'm not sure, Jeff, if you were in the entire PPC meeting for that item. But just to be clear, the item was referred, it was agreed, and the supervisors added more, as well as the public added more information, questions to be added to that report. And then it was referred to the full Board of Supervisors. And I did just get confirmation that it is agendized for Tuesday's board meeting. I saw it on the draft, but I didn't want to say anything until I was confirmed. It was confirmed that it's on the final, and it should be published any minute now. So on Tuesday's meeting of the Board of Supervisors is that greater discussion. And so I just wanted to be clear on that, because I think I've heard a lot of things about how this has been stalled, and it actually has been discussed at a couple different meetings and then referred to the full board where fuller discussion will go on. So I invite everybody to share their thoughts and concerns and insights. And just to be clear, the legislation that exists actually puts the authority of oversight in the Board of Supervisors' hands, and there can be a community advisory body, but they would be advisory to the Board of Supervisors, not to the sheriff or providing any kind of oversight. So just to be clear on the legislation that was reviewed in the PPC meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. And so what Jill was referring to is August 9th, Tuesday morning, starting at 9 a.m. Usually there might be a pause for public comment, but folks can join virtually. If you go to the county website, you can watch the meeting live, and there'll be opportunities for public comment, and that is in front of the full Board of Supervisors this next Tuesday. And I know I did officially open public comment, but I would do that at this time, and I see Christopher.
Well, right before Chris says anything, I just want to let you know that usually the Board of Supervisors opens at 9 and then goes into closed session. So they oftentimes will reopen the meeting back about 9:30. So that's when the official meeting starts.
Thank you. And those are recorded. So if you do end up missing the meeting, you can always watch it later, watch the recording to catch up. Christopher?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for recognizing me. I just wanted to say a few things on this, I think to maybe wrap this up a little bit. First and foremost, just so that, everyone, like members of the public, you all know, this group is meant to make recommendations for action or approval by the Board of Supervisors, right? So a lot of what we've heard has been reflected already to the at least to the PPC, which is sort of where things are now going up to the board. but the final decision is the Board of Supervisors to make. And despite the vote that that this group took last year, there wasn't that direct exchange of information coming from this entire group to explain sort of why that vote happened to those decision makers before, you know, the issue kind of took shape as it has up to this point. And so I'm just bringing those things up because I hear people saying they're frustrated, or maybe this group isn't doing whatever. And I just want to let folks know that this group is trying to access the proper channels, you know, as they exist and within its power and within this group's role to do that. And what's happening is without as much of a direct line of communication, you know, the issue of sheriff's oversight sort of more broadly kind of got taken up. And so for that purpose, I would echo Jeff's earlier stated sentiments about having, if at all possible, and kind of what happens with this is there's always a tight turnaround from the time that we have these conversations, right? But Jeff mentioned before potentially having a delegation from this group be able to speak to that. I think for the members of the community who have spoken so eloquently and so passionately here, I would greatly encourage you to also be there to share those exact same sentiments at that meeting, because I think that's the place where those actual ultimate decisions will happen, and not here despite our best efforts, but those efforts will continue to be made.
Thank you, Christopher. And I would like to take any additional public comment at this time. Are there other folks that would like to be heard on the report that Jeff gave from the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee? I see Melvin's hand.
Yeah, if I knew Sheriff Oversight was going to be a part of the report, I would have held my comments till now, but I won't double dip on that. I appreciate the information, and what I'll just say as a community organizer, trying to keep track on when some of these meetings are happening have been kind of difficult, because there is constantly a lot going on, especially with like COVID, and one day we're open, the next day we're closed. Sometimes we have eviction moratoriums to protect people, and sometimes we're fighting just to keep people housed so they even have an opportunity to participate. So all that being said, as an organizer, I'm doing my best on my end to keep communities engaged on these questions, on these issues like sheriff oversight. And I don't know if this body is already doing it, but figuring out a way to build like some sort of community partnership with organizations that are directly involved with community members so they can show up to forums like this too might be a good idea, because had it not been me knowing a couple of the oversight board members, I would have totally missed this meeting completely and wouldn't have been able to engage the public around that. And I do agree with Cheryl, because I was thinking about that too. We could have these meetings at 6, but at the same time, we also have to think about county staff time and everything that goes into that. So I do encourage, though, to still figure out what is that sweet spot that allows members of the public, including youth, who also are engaged around these conversations, but they're in school, but figure out what that sweet spot is, because community participation is important. And then when we do take this to the Board of Supervisors, if they don't hear that communities have been raising issues about this, that it may just came from the board in general, and makes it less impactful. And I know there's plenty of stories and impacts that people want to share. They just don't always have the time or flexibility to show up to spaces like this because life happens. So I just want to encourage finding that sweet spot of when communities can maximize their participation so more input can come in. And I do appreciate the work that I did here around sheriff oversight, and we'll be participating in Board of Supervisors in the next PPC meeting. So thank you all.
Thank you, Melvin. And I see Jane has her hand raised. Jane?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Jeff for his remarks, and also encourage the group to find representatives of this body and come to the PPC meeting. I think that's a great idea. I know Chris mentioned it as well. And it would just be really, really good to see a few of you representing this body that has in fact voted for the oversight body to be created. So thanks again. We know you're working hard. And again, thanks to the subcommittees as well. And I've only been to a couple of Jeff's meetings, but obviously a lot of hard thought and strategy goes into the decisions that are made there. And I know they're working. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jean. Any additional public comments? Sarah?
Hi, sorry, I'll make it real quick. My name is Sarah Stroin. I just wanted to thank you all for the discourse so far. Also, I have been organizing folks around just police accountability around the 2 police shootings in Danville that happened in 2018 and 2021. And yeah, I just wanted to echo what Melvin said. There is, and also, just let you all know there actually is a lot of support for sheriff oversight out in the South County, in the Danville, San Ramon Valley area. And yeah, I would love to be able to get more information to the public about how we can better support your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other commenters? All right, not seeing any. We are going to actually take the report from the diversion subcommittee first, because I know we're going to lose Stephanie Medley at 2:45, and I want to go ahead and get this one finished. So Stephanie, I'll send it over to you, and then we will take the report from the data subcommittee when we finish.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ellen. So we were able to meet twice. We did have to cancel our June 16th meeting, but as we talked about at our last quarterly meeting, two of our main focus areas that we decided to focus on this year was, one, looking at prevention and intervention programs and practices that are happening in the different school districts, and also looking at diversion eligibility criteria. So there's already been some ongoing work before we decided on focusing on school districts and prevention and intervention. There was already some work happening or starting to happen in West County that many of us were involved in. And so we are looking at starting some more intentional data collection and deeper data collection for some of the services and incidences that are happening in that district. Also, we're trying to get more connection and more information on what's happening in East County. And so we had a good discussion of some potential folks that we can connect with to get that information. And so we do want to connect more with the County Office of Ed to find out a little bit more information around the LCAP budgeting plans that districts have prepared, and also connect with some programs like Freedom Schools that are doing some work to support young people that are directly impacted by the system. Also, with our diversion eligibility criteria, we started off looking at what that criteria would look like for adults. And we have a list of offenses that would not be eligible for diversion, but also part of our discussion that we had at our last meeting was, even though those offenses may not at first glance seem eligible for diversion, there's always some mitigating circumstances. And so how do we take a deeper look into how we're looking at those mitigating circumstances, and if some of those offenses could actually be eligible for diversion? We haven't had a very deep discussion on that, but that is something that we've acknowledged. And we do want to get deeper into that discussion. Another thing that we want to make sure that we're looking at, because part of this is how we're reducing racial and ethnic disparities. And so with those offenses that we have, really taking a look at how those look up against the data from the data subcommittee and see who's being impacted and being charged for some of those offenses. And so we hope to dig deeper into that. Also starting to look at criteria for young people. And so knowing that it's going to look a little bit different for young people. And so our goal is to start looking at the diversion criteria for them. So those are our main things that we've been looking at. And there's still a lot to do. We want to make sure that whatever we do, especially around the school districts and how we're supporting programs there, it's not just in West County, but we're looking at the full county, East County, Central County, South. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the update. Members of the R Job, questions, comments, discussion. Not seeing any. Oh, Gigi.
Yeah, we all know how the school to prison pipeline is led. So I participated in a planning process in one of our school districts. I won't name it. And 38% of the African-American students were issued an IEP. I'm wondering if there's a way for us to dig even deeper prior to that, because what we're doing is we're traumatizing families and labeling young people. And then after that breaking of the spirit, I call it, from a faith-based practice, that's when the students start experiencing the problem. So are there any approaches that would be more preventative that we could utilize? We often look at the individual who has been deemed as the problem and not look at the individuals creating the problem. And when they came up with the plan, it pretty much put a burden on the families around attendance and things of that nature. And I know we have the welfare and school programs, but I haven't seen us produce the type of community-defined strategies that would empower the families and their students to feel positive about going into school environments where there is also systemic racism. Thanks.
Thank you, Gigi. And I see that Marcus is our next commenter, so he may have some good information on some of the points that you raised.
Well, actually, I was not going to address those points, but in general, there is a lot of scrutiny on the disproportionate overrepresentation of Black and Brown students in special education programs in school districts throughout the state, in fact. So those things are being reviewed and looked at, and it would be, I guess, that if there are specific items to look at, you said before we get into the issuance of an IEP, those would be better spoken to by someone in the special education world. But we can look at those things, and there are ways to do it and go about it. But just to point out that there are the disproportionality has been identified and is being reviewed, and there are things that are put into place. What those would be, I can't speak to, but we can do more to get that information out there. But I did want to just check in with Stephanie to make sure that that the subcommittee has connected with someone at the County Office of Education, and if not, please contact me so I can put you into touch with the right people around the LCAPs for the districts in this county.
Thanks, Marcus. I'll be sending an email out soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Any other member of the oversight body or proxy want to be heard? All right, not seeing any, I will open it up for public comment at this time on the report from the diversion subcommittee. Melvin?
Yeah, good afternoon again. Thank you, Ms. Medley, for that report out. Something that actually came up in a conversation I was having with ACE membership when we were talking about diversion programs and juvenile youth. One thing that came up was we had some seniors in the group who either knew people in the past who were in the criminal justice system or who had themselves once been in the criminal justice system. And what they wanted to see was really, what are we doing for these youth to not only bring them proper services to meet youth like where they're at and not treat them as some sort of suspect or enemy or anything, but what are we doing to build up their trades and skills and giving them opportunities to learn and see outside of the offenses that landed them in touch with the criminal justice system. So one idea that came out of that group that I wanted to share was figuring out how to build a better relationship with the labor unions or coordination to actually bring trades and vocational to some of these youth who can actually learn something and have skills forever that they can take with them, rather than the type of things we see in communities where there's a lot of illicit activities that surround our youth, and that's the only thing they see. Speaking from personal experience, that's the only thing I've seen growing up, and it's hard to break out of that when that's all you see around you, just mentally. And ideally, when it comes to data, I would be interested, this may be impossible, but I'd be interested to see like, what are those calls to services when police officers or sheriff's deputies are responding to calls, and what are those interactions broken down by demographic? Because, you know, Black and Latinos were overly represented in the criminal justice system, but at the end of the day, we're still a minority in this county. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that we're not the only ones that are being touched by the criminal justice system, but for some reason, disproportionately getting picked up by the criminal justice system. So if there's a way to look at that data on who's being let go and who's being taken in when it comes to these calls to services, that might be illuminating to come up with ways to address that disparity. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. Yumilu? Sorry, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation.
No problem, Ellen. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to ask in the spirit of urgency, especially for those of us who have lost our loved ones to Contra Costa jails. Is there, and I don't see on the screen under subcommittee next steps, but I'm just wondering, knowing that human beings work best, most of us, with deadlines, has this subcommittee set a deadline for when the review of criteria for diversion will be done, and when we'll actually be collaborating with CBOs and diverting as many youngsters as possible? So just curious about next steps and whether or not we have some real dates.
So we don't have any specific dates that we've talked about to be complete. I mean, this is, both of these two topics are things that we decided as a group that we were going to be working on for the remainder of the year. So, I mean, it's going to be an ongoing process. So at every meeting, we'll be reviewing something from either the diversion criteria or the school work, or both.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I see Phil Arnold's hand up and then also Cheryl.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to give everybody a point of reference that I live with. And as I said, I'm a septuagenarian. I'm 75 years old, so I'm a product of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And that was, in theory, a good decision. But as a result of that, I've never had a Black male teacher in my entire life. I've had a Russian teacher taught me how to speak Russian for the National Security Agency, but I've never had a Black male teacher. Our young men are at risk for their mental health when they see teachers that just cannot connect with them, just cannot. Where are the Black male teachers? That's a question for Lynn. I've known Lynn for 25 years, but where are they so that our young men who are, when I was growing up, I was considered to be, quote, an endangered species. What kind of label is that? But my question is that you have diversion programs, fine, but who do you trust? Who can you trust? Now, as a young man that's 12, 13 years old, going to trust an old brother like me that can sit there and talk to him? Or is he going to trust someone that's going to drive home to a different neighborhood than they live in and not have the same experience? So I probably should shut up right about now, but just wanted to plant that seed of thought and understanding that you got to see one to be one. And my teacher told me, Phil, colored boys don't go to college. Find something to do with your hands.
Thank you. Cheryl?
I don't know, this one's always a hard one because I go to all these meetings, all the subcommittee meetings, and diversion always is one that, for those of you who don't come to these meetings, you should know that it's gets pretty contentious sometimes because we recognize that I'm going to use my own words. I'm not going to use somebody else's. I'm not going to put it on anybody else, but there's people behind the numbers that come from the data subcommittee to the diversion committee and then the community engagement committee. They're all tied together. And what makes it hard is when they're operating in silos, and then we all come together in this quarterly meeting. Is, recognizing the urgency that Ms. Inouye just talked about it's just very difficult because intuitively the urgency, yet you can't make it move any faster than it can move. Because there's some people like me who refuses to say that everything is everything, or that's, and or Mr. Misha or Miss Gigi or Michael or Renelle or any of us who say that there's certain people who've been impacted by or Miss Stephanie, or they've been impacted by the system, and there's circumstances behind that. So rose is not a rose, is not a rose, and a theft is not a theft, is not a theft. I don't condone any crime, but there's always something behind it. So it's not as simple as is black and white all the time. So I think that some of this is not as easy as coming to this one meeting every 3 months and only getting this very short snapshot of the report and not knowing all of the work that went into what we've been really duking it out these months behind the scenes, trying to come up with these definitions, especially of what diversion means, because diversion means something different in the educational space to the people who are working in the educational space. And so we've had to sit there and really talk about what that means. And what does it mean in the criminal punishment and the criminal legal space? And what does that mean in the mental health space? So I think that having that representation from each one of those spaces and those subcommittee meetings has been very worthwhile and important. And so those kind of conversations have to take place in those subcommittee meetings. And they have to be ironed out there. So when we come here with that recommendation to the oversight body to give to the Board of Supervisors, we do have something that is reflective of what the community is going through. Because everybody has something that they're bringing to it. We can't strip away our own experiences or the experiences of the community that we see. But it's gonna have a different lens. So right now it still feels like, I said this last week and I still feel that way. Sometimes it still feels like we're operating in these silos and ad hoc, but that data subcommittee that we're gonna hear that report in a moment has so much information that we should be using that's informing our decisions rather than sometimes emotions. Desi, thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks, Stephanie, for your report and update. So now we're going to move to the report from the data subcommittee.
Ellen, I saw Michael's hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. Sorry, I missed you.
Okay. I agree with everything that Cheryl said, and I'm going to take this moment to urge our public members to attend some of these subcommittee meetings, or the meetings that are open to everyone. This is just the quarterly meeting that it's a snapshot. There's so much work that takes place behind the scenes. So I would urge participation and input from the public when we're having some of these very, very difficult conversations. So just check the agenda, and we would love to have your input at these meetings.
Thank you, Michael. And as another member of the diversion subcommittee, I agree. I think there's some very robust conversations having there. And it would be a good space to have community input and presence. So let's move on now to the data subcommittee.
Hi, everyone. This is Patrice Guillory here from Office of Retrain Justice. And so I'll be giving the report out on behalf of the data subcommittee. So over the last few months, there are a few things that we have been working on. We talked a little bit about some of the updated information that we've received in terms of our reporting to, or staff's reporting to PPC regarding offering data requests and a capacity for data analysis. One, when receiving information from the various criminal justice agencies. We've also been working really hard to get the police trainings off the ground for adolescent development. So we're really excited that movement has been taking place on the federal side to receive some resources to have that training be made available to local law enforcement agencies. It's still pending. It is literally an act of Congress, literally. So we're awaiting the outcome of that. We've done some discussion around ethnicity data collection. We had a really great presentation, as you all were present to, from Burns Institute during a quarterly meeting. And so we had some follow-up discussions on that during one of our data subcommittee meetings. We also talked a little bit about some of the outcomes from previous PPC and the internal operations, or otherwise known as IOC meetings. And I'll give a more broad update on that in just a moment. And then continue our discussion of the data that we've received so far from Sheriff's Office, Probation, and Office of Ed. I do want to acknowledge that in our last meeting, we did vote for our new chair, which is Shayla Bonner. So we're really excited that she is not only back from maternity leave and still active and ready to go, but she is also willing to step up to the plate and lead our subcommittee. Some of the actions that we are looking to rather get some insight from the full body is that, as you all know, it's been quite a challenge to receive data from all justice agencies to begin to see the full picture of where disparities lie across the criminal justice continuum. In addition to that, ORJ in partnership with Burns has been providing staff support to this full body, but in order to support moving the needle on some of these data related recommendations really require significant resource allocation for data collection, management, and analysis. And so we're limited in that regard. Not to mention it poses a bit of a conflict when one law enforcement agency, in this case, ORJ, sitting in probation, doing analysis of other criminal justice agencies' data. So these sort of challenges were brought to the PPC, and right now where things stand is just that there is a looking into what other alternatives may be there, whether it's partnering with the public university or what may be some other avenues for having a third party or neutral party that would support the data collection and analysis work to then support the implementation of the recommendations. But that said, though, that then sort of stymies our process as data subcommittee does its work. So we took the opportunity to really think very intentionally about going forward, how should we as a subcommittee operate? And so these were a few things that we're considering, and we'd love to get the feedback from the full body. And one of those is to move the subcommittee meeting schedule instead of monthly to quarterly. Another is to potentially dissolve the data subcommittee and form an ad hoc committee that would then provide a response to any of the data requests from the other subcommittees. And the reason why this came up is because it was clear, as Cheryl alluded to, the fact that oftentimes the subcommittees are operating in isolation of each other. And so maybe in this way, there's an opportunity for whether it's policy creation or program design or what have you that might be happening in the other subcommittees, that there is at least some place where data can be discussed and worked through to help inform what those particular products would be. So that's the second option. The third is to have the subcommittee go into hiatus for some time until the issue around data collection and analysis is resolved and can be identified. The committee members did agree that overall we still wanted to continue to make sure that the data that's currently being reported continues irrespective of what the which option we choose. And that could be done by bringing that information to the full body meetings, as well as posting it on the static dashboard that's currently on the RJOB webpage. And let's see here. And then we also, so attached to this report are the latest data reports that came from the agencies that I've mentioned before. And I believe that's it. So I'll pause to answer any questions that folks might have, or if there are other subcommittee members that would like to add anything that I may have missed.
Thank you for that report, Patrice. Members of the RJOB that have comments or questions? Jeff?
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Patrice, for the update on the data subcommittee. I haven't been present for, I don't think, really any of the data subcommittee meetings. So I'm asking in ignorance, but wondering if there's been examination of existing reporting sources. And I understand that this may have already been done, but I find in so many of the different spheres where I'm trying to get information about what's happening locally, that sometimes buried in a larger budget document or another funding reporting requirement that goes to federal or state in order to receive funds may have some of the things that are existing, and that it's already public and we don't need to make the request to the local agencies. So I'm asking this with humility, knowing that there may have already been exhaustion of this, but that also sometimes it's there in another form and that it can be something that we can be exploring more because it doesn't have those same sort of hurdles in terms of getting authorization. So is it possible maybe to speak to that in general? Right, just putting that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the challenge here is not so much in terms of was twofold. There's the gathering of information that you're right could be found in other sources, but then there's also the analysis that can I don't want to say compound, but at least bring all the information together to help us see a bigger view of what's actually taking place. And then as you're reviewing that information, and it prompts further questions where you may need to do a deeper dive into the data, right? We just don't have the staff capacity at this time that can be dedicated to that. So, and oftentimes it's also even better to have representation from the actual agency that's doing the reporting, so you can ask those sort of questions and get a little bit more clarity behind the numbers. So you're right in that we can find information in others from other sources, but for us, it's more or less pulling all of that together so that we can really understand at each juncture throughout the continuum what's really happening and why and how one decision may have led to another and so on.
Thank you. Gigi?
Yeah, I'm pretty much I'm in agreement with Jeff, but then also understand what Patrice is saying. I've only attended the PPC meeting one time, and that's where the sheriff was given, I guess, an update to the board of supervisors, to Candace and Supervisor Anderson and Supervisor Glover. And I was shocked that there was no data around ethnicity. And I felt supported by Supervisor Anderson when she said, yes, that should be included. I mean, how can you work toward reducing the disparities if you're not given the information needed? And he did say, oh, this department collects that, but we don't. It was kind of odd for me that we would not be sharing that in a report back. I don't know if it was a quarterly report back. I was out of turn with when I spoke up, but I was just so shocked by the fact that we were not getting ethnicity data when we know it's such a big problem.
Thank you, Gigi. And I will just add, I think a good example of ethnicity data and how powerful it is to look at the data from probation that really is succinct, is easy to follow, and shows the extreme disparity for our children in terms of the overrepresentation of Black and Brown children in our system. And so I would think a goal definitely of this body is to ensure that we have something comparable on the adult side so that we're really able to look and see. And I know that probation has been really consistent and transparent with this data. So I think it's really commendable and I appreciate it, but it does sort of show the gap for other pieces of, law enforcement, and then later with our court system and those outcomes as well. And I know frequently when community groups ask me to talk to them about our system, I'm really relying on these older graphics, the work from the original racial justice task force, and some data that really I think would be helpful to have something updated. So I know the subcommittee's been doing a big push around that. And I do appreciate that there is this question, this larger question of where it should reside and who should be moving that forward, as it isn't necessarily a great fit to have it for all of the rest of the law enforcement agency requests within probation. So I appreciate that we're working to move that forward. Gigi?
Thank you, because I would like to see how many kids were, in contact with law enforcement, and then the ethnicity of the children who ended up in juvenile hall. So from the beginning to the end, working with all of the jurisdictions reporting in, in Danville, this kid, whatever, did this or that, but they were released. But in Antioch, this kid did the same, but hey, he ends up in juvenile hall. If we don't have that kind of data, how are we going to do our work around, you know, reducing the disparities? Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Gigi. And I'm scrolling. You all are so much better at seeing hands than I am. So is there anyone else from the Racial Justice Oversight Body? Don't see anyone. And then we will go ahead and take public comment on this item, the report from the data subcommittee. Melvin?
Yeah, Gigi basically in a much better way than I did reiterated my previous point about what kids are being picked up about and what is that demographic. So thank you for re-raising that. And I was gonna share my email in the chat, or if there could be an announcement on when the next subcommittee meetings are, because I don't know when or where or how often they happen, and I'd like to participate because sometimes I do feel like I'm playing catch up. So I'll just share my email. So if there's notifications for the next subcommittee, I personally appreciate getting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin.
And Ellen, if I could respond to that, I did place in the chat both links to the Our Job webpage as well as the PPC webpage as well, that has a listing of meeting dates as well as links to the Agenda Center where the agendas are publicly posted.
Thank you, Patrice.
And also one more thing. So before we move on, I do just want to highlight again that the subcommittee is seeking some feedback from our job members with regards to how we should continue operations going forward, given the 3 options that were raised in the report.
Jeff?
Okay, so I already spoke. At the risk of saying something more, I need to be, hesitating before I'm suggesting that the group should be meeting more regularly when I'm not the one who's going to be doing the work. So I think, of course, it needs to be ultimately the decision of the members of the data subcommittee. And I feel like, boy, this is an essential piece, and there's always another way to come at the problem, but that's not right. I'm already in the community engagement and funding subcommittee, and reality is I'm not going to be the one who's going to be pushing on this however often it happens. I guess I'd say from afar, it seems hard for me to process that that once a month is too much, because I feel like, boy, there's all these different ways, different sources, different people to be talking to, but I'm not there on the day-to-day. So that's my qualified input, is that I'd be hesitant to move to either pausing or even a quarterly. Don't want things to be happening monthly without any action happening, but everyone knows this is a key piece. And maybe with the continued effort, the call out to the folks here at the quarterly full body meeting, that there can be invigoration, and that monthly may still be worthwhile.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other Our Job member? Cheryl?
Yeah, I think that was the sentiment. That was the sentiment that was expressed during the subcommittee meeting, was that either way, who's going to do the work, even if it's paused or if the committee is so-called dissolved, the work still has to be done, right? I think my concern was just that it's this feeling of silos, because you still have to, I wanted to see just the committees working more together with the data, because it affects every committee. You got to use the data to inform what are we going to do to get the community more aware of what's happening, and then more engaged in helping inform decisions that the oversight body, the recommendations the oversight body is going to make to help the board of supervisors actually make decisions. You need the data to help the diversion committee make recommendations to the board of supervisors to actually, enact. You need the data for us to understand, where we're having these gaps, why we're having these gaps, and for the community to understand, not acting from emotions or ad hoc, but from actual information. We know what we see, but sometimes our eyes lie to us, and sometimes stories lie to us, but data does not. And so I think that's kind of where we are stuck and I go to all of them. So I'm just speaking from my experience from going to all of the meetings, being in the meetings, and just watching how it plays out. That and I think Ms. Jill has been in all three of the subcommittee meetings too. So she knows this dynamic too. I just think we need the data. It's a very important subcomponent for every subcommittee and for this oversight body. It's just what should that structure look like? And I think that's where we are right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Anything else from members of the oversight body on this? All right, not seeing any hands. Moving to public comment, and I do see Jill.
You called me out, Miss Cheryl. I have to say from a public / BOS office perspective, the data is so incredibly important. The challenge has been with the move of ORJ into probation, it sort of took that higher level of ability to analyze other agencies' data, and tying, like Ms. Cheryl said, tying all of the different subcommittees together, since data is so imperative. And the hope was, quite frankly, that our job would be placed in the Office of Reentry and Social Justice and Racial Equity and Social Justice. I know I'm going to get it, Patrice. It's just going to roll soon. And that process has gone a lot slower than we anticipated. And so we are working very, very hard, Patrice mentioned it, behind the scenes, to try and find a place to place this so that the data can be analyzed. But bottom line is, I think probation, Office of Ed, and Sheriff are the only three entities who are providing data at this point in time. And without the other justice partners to provide data, it's an incomplete picture. And so it's impossible to determine, where changes can be made without the data from all the different partners, because it's not just one area. And then on another note, Gigi mentioned about the sheriff saying that they didn't have racial data. There's two different kinds of data, and Denise pointed it out. There's the self-initiated stops that police officers are doing, that they're putting into the state database. That data is not coming back to the counties. That's going into the state database. And so I think that might have been what the sheriff was talking about, but they do have data on who's incarcerated, both in the juvenile system as well as the adult system. So I'll just leave it at that. I think data is so incredibly important. I think the only challenge at this point in time is there's just nowhere to analyze it identified in our county. And so for that reason, this subcommittee continues to meet and reviewing basically the same data month after month. And it's important to see, but whether or not the energy going into that could be used in other areas is the question at this point in time, until that data analysis piece is fixed.
Thank you for that context, Jill. That's helpful. Christopher, those are applause, not a request to speak. Gotcha. Anyone else on this? Patrice, do you feel like you need more direction?
No, I think hearing from some of the members that it's probably best that the data subcommittee members make the sort of final call there. We'll be certain to share that back out at the next quarterly meeting. If I may, I'm doing a report out, but I'm not the chair. So Shayla, forgive me if I'm overstepping.
Thank you, Patrice.
No worries. Thanks, Patrice. This is all new to me. I actually thought I was reporting out today. I was a little nervous, but thank you for taking on that responsibility.
All good, all good.
Congrats, Shayla, and we'll get you next time. Don't worry.
Thank you, thank you.
And then we're going to pivot back to Patrice for discussing updates from the PPC and the IOC meetings. Thanks, Patrice, for doing double duty. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to pause. I do see Jane's hand is up, so I will go ahead and take just one last public comment on this last item.
Yes, I was curious when I heard that one of the possibilities was partnering with perhaps some academic institution. This sounds like a doctoral dissertation in some criminal justice program. I know that this is an expanding field, that more and more students are going on, certainly into higher degrees and advanced degrees. And there are a number of institutions throughout our state that are dealing with the criminal legal system. And very often the focus on a particular county can be very revealing. So I would encourage the subcommittee to really look at, and I would actually be willing to do some research myself as to what institutions might potentially be the ones that might have somebody, if not a professor, an instructor, a potential graduate student. Because I work with a lot of state criminal legal groups, advocacy groups, and every once in a while, some graduate student turns up at a meeting who is doing some kind of a survey and research. So that is one idea that I think sounds like it might have potential. It's not going to happen immediately, but it just sounded like a very reasonable idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And I do see Shayla's hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. That's actually something we thought about, but correct me if I'm wrong, subcommittee, is that a lot of the entities, law enforcement entities, did not want to share that data outside of county, right? So like, you know, getting a academic person to do the analysis for us was kind of out of the question. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrice.
No, you're not. No, you're not off on that one. That is a concern for some agencies to give their information over to a third party. So, but it's also not completely off the table, considering some of the things that Jen just mentioned as well. Sorry.
Thanks, everyone. And so we're going to circle back to Patrice on our next item with updates from the Public Protection and Internal Operations Committees.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. So in regards to the PPC and the IOC meetings, I'll just back up a little bit. As you all may recall, back in February was the annual update that was provided to PPC members by Chris over at Burns Institute. And so a number of items were shared with PPC members, including some of the actions that had taken place during last year's activities, and then also some pending issues or challenges that the body will be facing in terms of its work going forward. And so following from that, couple of items have been discussed at the May PPC meeting, which I don't feel I want to go too much into it because I think we covered it quite a bit, which was the sheriff's oversight body and discussions around that, and then also the data analysis piece regarding the challenges that we're facing in terms of who will do the data analysis and the requests that are to be made to the various criminal justice agencies to facilitate that process. Following that, our job was also then referred from PPC to the Internal Operations Committee, just to get a better handle on, or a better review, if you will, of our job's charge and structure, again, to address any of these issues that may affect the way in which the body operates going forward. So in that, there were a couple of other challenges or ideas that came up from staff. One included the ambitiousness of the recommendations and whether or not adequate resources are made available to help steer the body's ability to really implement those recommendations. Obviously, limited staffing support was another issue or challenge in regards to how to ensure that work moves forward and the activities are continuing to go forward, and that there's a feedback loop from the body to PPC members. There's also mention of the sort of imbalance in representation across public agencies and the board approved members or the community representatives across the subcommittee levels, given that at the subcommittee levels, it is members can self-select which subcommittee they wish to join. And so in some cases that would then, you would see then sort of an equal representation, I'll say, across public agency representatives and community reps. And then also looking at the issue of potentially establishing term limits to create an opportunity for more members of the public to engage and join in on our job. This really came out of what we've seen in terms of the enormous interest from the most recent application process and recruitment process to fill the 2 vacant seats. We'll be going into a fall full recruitment process pretty soon for all the remaining community rep seats whose term will end at the end of this year. And so in preparation of that, taking into account that as great as it is that so many members of the public are really interested in this issue, interested in this work and want to be a part of our job, how do we create space for that ongoing engagement? And so the outcomes from that discussion, and forgive me, the membership of IOC is Supervisor Candace Anderson, who also sits on the Public Protections Committee, and then Supervisor Diane Burgess. And so from that, the IOC members felt that the charge of our job should remain as is, that it has the flexibility, is broad enough so that the membership can operate in a manner that is flexible and will best fit the way in which the body wishes to move forward. And that there was great concern that the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, there had not been an update just as of yet, but would like to see our job be supported through that office, considering that resources have been set aside through Measure X allocations to support getting that office off the ground, and hope to see adequate support coming from that to support our job going forward. So given the nature of that conversation, the sub question here is in light of these updates, how does our job want to operate going forward? And the reason being that this question is being posed to the full body is to be sure that, as it was spoken to a little earlier, down at the subcommittee level is where you see a lot of the work taking place, but then also there's time constraints there, and also wanting to create more room and space for the debates that need to take place to then develop the work that needs to be developed to then take action on them and bring them forward. So when you have situations where we have public meetings such as this, where we have members of the public feeling as though progress, and even from our job members themselves, feeling as though progress, is not being made, it does bring up a concern about whether or not we as a full body have managed our expectations well. Are recommendations, though super important, sort of limiting or kind of off kilter from the very capacity that is currently available to help us move the needle forward. So we'll open it up at this point for any questions or comments you all might have, but that is something that I think has been discussed in various different circles and was obviously brought up to both PPC and IOC with regards to ensuring that our job members feel as though progress is being made, though at the same time, what is needed to be in place to ensure that work moves forward. And I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Patrice, for that update. Let's go now to members of the oversight body to discuss the questions that Patrice threw out there. Jeff.
Thanks again, Ellen and Patrice. I guess my initial thoughts in response are that I'll accept as true that there are insufficient resources as needed presently to do all the work that we want to. And I think from my vantage point, the only response can be additional resources provided rather than scaling back our ambitions, because I think already our ambitions are a reduction of what the community was saying needs to be done, and that we had prioritized certain areas as being those that we would take lead, and other essential things have been put on back burner because of the realities of our resources and what we can do. So if we are facing the reality of we're not able to achieve all the things that we've set out as priority, I think as a group, we would need to respond to say to supervisors that we need more resources in order to do this work, because we've agreed that all of it is essential, at least those parts that we've already put as lead is essential, and that more will need to be done, because I think it's not a palatable or acceptable alternative for us to say, let's scale back what we have as our vision to be done.
Thank you, Jeff. Gigi?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jeff. We're in a county that deemed racism as a public health crisis in November of, I guess it was 21, maybe it was 20. So if that's true, then we have to align our funding with the priority to make a difference with that. So doing less when there's more pain, when COVID has definitely shown us even more disparities, more hurt, more pain, more death by particular communities, then I think if there's a need for us to request funding to hire the staffing needed while we're waiting for this Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice to be lifted, or maybe we can borrow from some of the money they're not using or tapping into to have the staffing made available while we're waiting for that office. Because how a lot of us save money every year is through salary savings. So I was on the Measure X cab, and I know that money was allocated, and I don't think they're spending it. So definitely, instead of scaling back, rev up so we can actually start improving outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Gigi. Well said. I would just kind of agree, ditto to both of you, and also to Patrice's kind of naming the fact that we have folks both from our job and from the community feeling the sense of urgency, and that things aren't moving as swiftly as they would like to see. So to the extent we can really lift that up to the Board of Supervisors, let them know there are capacity issues that would really help some funding would assist to move things forward in terms of our priorities as an oversight body and our work plan. I would be an additional voice in support of what others have more articulately stated. Other folks from the oversight body. All right, I'm scrolling. I'm not seeing any hands. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to members of the public for public comment on Patrice's presentation. Carol?
Yeah, I don't know if you, oh, first of all, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for all your hard work over the years, despite the frustration. But I don't know if you saw my question in the chat about adding, if you can send me info about the recruitment process for our job. I put my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. And Denise replied with a comment. Thanks to Denise from ORJ. That there'll be, did you see that there'll be an open recruitment later in the year? And there's typically going to be a broad announcement. I don't know if someone can put the Our Job website back in the chat so everyone has that fresh. And Christopher might have some more information on this. I see his hand is raised. No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My hand is raised, not quite specifically to that, but to raise a different point. That sort of ties the last discussion around the data subcommittee and its ask to this one. So the question is, in addition to the resources that we know we need and the staffing issues and delay for the opening of the ORESJ, there's also a question of whether or not the meeting cadence or schedule that we have right now is the best way to advance the work. As I said last week in the data subcommittee, if you recall, this body was meant to meet and its subcommittees meet quarterly initially. Like that's how it was set up. And then you all, as the very astute individuals that you are, just you came to the conclusion that you wouldn't be able to do the amount of work that was necessary on these items by just meeting every quarter, and decided to meet every month, which has been, I think, really, it speaks to the level of dedication and commitment that you all have up to this point. But when we look at a data subcommittee that is saying, we're limited in what we can provide right now or what we can analyze so that we can actually use it and draw meaningful conclusions from it that help us to move forward. Or if you look at, subcommittee meetings that come around so rapidly, especially for those of us who are in all of them, that folks may take on, at least nominally, at least vocally, certain next steps or certain assignments or certain to-dos, and think that they have a month to do those things, come back next month, and I haven't really made as much progress on that particular item as I would have liked. The question is, and it also speaks to Cheryl's, one of Cheryl's earlier comments about how work gets done in these meetings. I think that's the intent, but I think sometimes these meetings come up so fast that sometimes there's not a whole lot of the actual collaboration and development of the next iteration of work as much as there is discussion, right? So one of the questions has been along the line of the data subcommittee, right? If the subcommittees, could meet a little bit less frequently, with the work continuing, but continuing in these subcommittees, right? So like, I'm sorry, not subcommittees, work groups. So for instance, in the diversion subcommittee, there are smaller, less than quorum groups of members who show up to really hash out some level of proposal to bring back to the larger group to then respond to, because on some level, these meetings are all sort of geared around report outs, right? So people come in with something to show you, and then there being a response, and that there's a difference between the usefulness of that and the usefulness of space to actually build, make, develop from scratch that thing. And so wondering if some working groups that may meet a little bit more regularly and then report out to a subcommittee that meets, say, bi-monthly or quarterly, will have more work to actually show for, for everybody's time. So that was just something that had been kicked around a bit and seemed worth bringing up to you all. Definitely something that we talked about a little bit last week with the data subcommittee.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else have something to add in response to that from the public? All right, hang in there, everyone. We're getting close. Our next item is going to be to discuss coordination and calendaring with PPC. And Chris, were you gonna present on this one?
This is probably for the best. So I spoke earlier to, when we were talking about sheriff's oversight in particular, right? I spoke to the fact that essentially that got raised to the PPC because I had to do a year-end report on the body that sort of summed up the body's actions, including that recommendation or that vote to reinstate as a recommendation officially the approval of a board of supervisors, an oversight board for the sheriff. And there was no direct conversation really between this body, or say a direct meeting between this body who made that vote for the various reasons that have been presented here among, potentially some others, to give context to what that conversation had been, why, specifically an oversight body was the only thing that would really suffice and not any other alternative, so on and so forth, before that kind of started to move forward. And so to try to prevent similar situations from emerging going forward, right, as this body continues to make recommendations and to dialogue with the PPC and or board of supervisors, the question is, we know, and I believe the word that we received from PPC and or board of supervisors is we're open, we're happy to attend a meeting if you all let us know that you want us to attend a meeting because there's some issue that you want to discuss. I just think for us, I mean, that's huge, and we really appreciate that first and foremost. But now that we have that, what is the process by which we can do it, right? What's the process by which we actually move that into action? So that at some point in the future, if we want to dialogue directly with the PPC, say before something gets on an agenda, we can do it. I mean, it seems to me that it might be something like a form letter, first of all, of a motion and then a vote. And then after that vote, assuming that that invitation is approved, some form letter in writing that says we request, an audience with, or, attendance by the PPC at, an upcoming RJOB quarterly meeting or something like that. And those are things that are, I think, worth sort of sussing out and developing so that the next time something like this comes up, we have a process in place for how to directly reach out and make sure that, we're not sort of on the back end saying, hey, everybody, delegation, emergency, like we need to show up to this meeting, whether you had time in your schedule for it or not, and there's time and space either here or in one of their meetings, but with enough notice for everyone who needs to be heard to be there. So that is the question. That's sort of my idea, at least for how you might move that forward, but certainly I'm open to other suggestions about how you guys can make a formal request and institute a process by which those formal requests come from this body and go to the PPC or above.
Thank you, Christopher. Members of the body would like to be heard about this. Jeff?
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Chris. I know I'm always talking. But yes, I feel like this is essential. It's something that's come up several different times where we've made the intention and we want to serve this right. As several of us have said over time, we're here to be advising the Board of Supervisors. We can't do the things on our own unless we have our own individual agencies where we can make the changes. So this is only worthwhile if it's actually going to get to the supervisors and they can implement. So yes, I think we do need a formal process and not a general kind of hope that this will make its way to the next step. Trusting that everyone here, the supervisors who gave us the ability to act, are wanting us to move efficiently. And it's frustrating on both sides when we're ready to take action and we're just wanting them to hear, and the supervisors on the other end are hoping that they'll hear that we're taking action. We need to be taking every opportunity to make sure that when we're ready to move on something, or we need to hear an answer from the supervisors, that there's clear communication and that there's a set out way that we can say, how do we get this on the agenda so that there isn't any ambiguity about what's trying to happen on each end. I think we're due for that. And I'm glad that, Chris, you're raising it. So whatever the means of that is, if it's a form letter, yeah, let's work with that as a starting point and see how that goes.
Thank you, Jeff. And I agree. I think having a simple mechanism, a letter, a way to put something in writing after this group has agreed upon it and voted to move that forward would just procedurally give us a way to ensure that we're being heard on a regular basis and being as efficient as we can, because having sort of non-transparent communication, I think, for a public body is less than ideal, and sort of bringing this in a form. I think one of the pieces, I don't know that there are any, there's no one here today from the county administrator's office that staffs the PPC, but it would be helpful to just ensure that we're collaborating with folks that staff that body to ensure that it's sort of put together in a way that works. And Chris, I don't know, is this something you wanted general feedback from the body, and then you were going to sort of take next steps to speak with CAO staff and see what we would need to do?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable way to go. Definitely just wanted to give folks sense of, if they wanted to move forward with something in writing. I think what we've been relying on up to this point is, so you guys take action here, and then I think there's an expectation that someone behind the scenes, whether it's like ORJ or support staff, will make that request known, which I'm sure is happening. But I think, having a record of it so that we're not saying, remember that one meeting 2 months ago when we said, and we have an actual record of we made the request and we know that it got to the right person, would be probably a better way to move it forward. So however we need to coordinate with CAO's office or whoever is sort of interfacing directly with the PPC to make sure it works. Once folks are sold on sort of using that sort of process, I think we'll be ready to go.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other member of the oversight body wish to be heard about this proposal? Going once, going twice. I'm going to open it up to members of the general public for public comment on this topic. Melvin?
Yeah, thank you. Just curious if this meeting is open to the public, when will our job and Public Protections Committee be having their joint meeting, just for my knowledge, and I can inform other members of the public who feel strongly about some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll leave it to someone who has the answer to that to maybe throw it in the chat or raise their hand. I will say the suggestion for folks to subscribe to agendas is a good one. If you put your email in, as Jill detailed a few sections back in the chat, you can subscribe to agendas and ensure that they're just going to come directly to your email anytime certain either the Racial Justice Oversight Body or the Board of Supervisors or the PPC meets. But if there's anyone that has more information about timing on Melvin's question, feel free to chime in. And
yeah, if I can, I don't know how to do when I'm sharing screen. I don't know how to raise my hand. So what we typically do here at ORJ, when there is a our job, related agenda item that is posted for the PPC meeting, we do send that out to at the very least all of the our job members. That's the one way at least we alert all of the members for them to know that there's an important our job related discussion point that will be coming up. Usually agendas are posted around 96 hours or so before the scheduled meeting dates. So just to echo Ellen's point, if you sign up for the email notifications for the PPC meeting agendas, you'll get that immediately in your mailbox or email when those agendas have been posted.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrice. Ms. Bates?
Thanks, Ellen. I just wanted to offer somewhat of an outsider perspective, and this is really tied back to Christopher's suggestion he made, I think, one agenda item ago. And I had responded in chat, but I just feel like this body and its subcommittees is at a critical juncture. And I feel, having attended almost all the subcommittees for over a year, I sense like there's a lull, and in order to, at the very least, maintain momentum, if not amp it up, as has been suggested by other people here, but I wanted to second Christopher's brainstorm or his proposal that he made, that there is a space set aside for action to happen in between these meetings. So we don't just end up going in circles at these long meetings, and that there are some action items have taken place in the interim. So goals can be met. And I'm saying this because I'm noticing, like, as subcommittee members drop off because they have other obligations, then the vision is, like someone here had mentioned, they weren't even aware of this, the RJOB body happening or how to access this meeting. So people have to be retrained or re-onboarded, and that causes a lull and makes us not as impactful as I think we could be if we are able to make sure that there are action items addressed in between these meetings. So whether or not that means that these meetings happen less frequently, like I think Christopher was suggesting, if I'm not misrepresenting you, Christopher, or some other type of design readjustment. But I know we all want to get to our goals. We just need to make sure that the structure is in place to allow for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Christopher?
Thank you. So to Melvin's earlier question, I just wanted to clarify, there is no upcoming meeting that's calendared right now for sort of a crossover meeting between PPC and our job, because that would have likely been a meeting about sheriff's oversight. And that has been kicked, quite far down the road now. So we're needing to play catch up at the next Board of Supervisors meeting next Tuesday, which has gotten quite a bit of fanfare already, and hope that folks who want to be heard can attend that. So just wanted to point that out and say what we're trying to do is prevent another such situation, which is why we're sort of talking about how we create or develop a procedure that provides some written record and a need for some recorded action, to make sure that that dialogue happens. To Emily's point, I'll just say on the last agenda item, again, I do think if we want to have that momentum, right? Like it does require, sort of recalibrating or looking at where we are now and saying, okay, maybe this isn't going as far in the direction that we intended to move as maybe we could. And so just being willing to really recalibrate, again, remembering that you guys created the schedule as it is. So it's not something that is, etched in stone or written into law in some way that it can't be changed. This body has the power to decide to meet or for its subcommittees, let's say, to meet bi-monthly or quarterly, and for smaller work groups that would be less than the quorum of that group and whoever else wants to attend, as long as it's not members who make it a quorum, mind you, to be able to really workshop some of these things and bring something significant back to the subcommittee so that subcommittees are ready to, make decisions or move things forward. I would also say, within those working groups, there's the flexibility, perhaps, because it wouldn't be the same sort of public noticed meeting. Obviously, we'd be willing to work, and certainly here at the BI, we'd be willing to do whatever we needed to do to make sure as many people who wanted to attend were aware. If that was creating a listserv or whatever else we needed to do, we'd be willing and happy to try to facilitate that as best we could. But it allows for, more flexibility with the timing and scheduling of that. We've been talking a lot about trying to make sure the community has, the opportunity to attend, and not just necessarily in times that are so 9 to 5 sort of based. So those are all options that we can explore. Sorry to put 2 agenda items together in my remarks, but just wanted to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands that have not already spoken. Patrice?
Yeah, I also want to give further context to Chris's proposal, and we'd love to hear from our job members about this and get you guys' feedback specifically. We have both the diversion committee, who at this time is really having some very serious policy debates with regards to an eligibility criteria, exclusivity criteria. As someone who actually sat through a prior process with the former LEAD project we had in the county, and Ellen probably could speak to it better than I can, that was a very lengthy process and required a lot of hashing out and some consensus, I won't say compromise, but a consensus being developed among those who had great expertise in the various charges and the natures of how those charges can come about, and into their perspective and outlook on the various legal eagles in the room. I'll just leave it at that. And then brought that forward to, at the time, we had a policy committee who then further debated how we would adopt and apply that particular policy. At the same time, we have the community engagement and funding subcommittee, who's really trying to work through what's the best way of creating technical assistance and capacity building for community organizations, and looking at various models and wanting to see what would work best with the keeping in mind the intention of what our job is setting out to do. So some of these things really require a lot of talking through and working through, reviewing information, doing some research, gathering information to help shape what it is that you would want adopted, especially when we're talking about these are county-wide efforts, right? In the case of the data subcommittee, we're now at a kind of a stopping point, if you will, if we don't have the data from all the other justice partners. So I say all that to say, to give further context as to why Chris is proposing the possibility of sort of slowing down our meeting cadence and creating more space for those kind of conversations and brainstorming efforts to take place so we can produce and provide that progress that we ultimately want to see. That would then mean that as a body and as a community that we really manage our expectations on what it is that we can actually bring forth. But if we at least create the space for the critical conversations to be had and create opportunities for community members to be a part of those discussions, I think we will find ourselves in the long run being able to adopt some really important and significant changes that will ultimately move the needle with regards to reducing disparities in the system. So I will hope to hear more feedback from our job members on Chris's proposal.
Thank you, Patrice. Our job members, we'd love your feedback on Chris's proposal. Michael.
I like the idea of the smaller committees or groups having more autonomy to kind of set their own schedule and kind of meet as needed. I like the ideas that Chris has presented. And I think it kind of goes to some of the other stuff we just talked about the data committee and the timing. I think the committees are better equipped to determine how much time or energy or how many meetings they should have. I think that should be left up to the individual committees or subcommittees. And also on the piece that has to do with implementing policies, I think that we should have a definite carve out, like a specific time or meeting that we're going to meet with the board of supervisors, or we're going to meet with one of the other committees. I think that we should have a carve out, a regular time that we know we're going to present and maybe give them progress of what we have. And I know it's done annually now, I believe, but I think that it would kind of move things along a lot sooner if we were on their agenda or we were having these already prearranged meetings with them when they know that, okay, well, this is the time for them to talk about what the R job has done, whether it's the research, whether it's a policy plan, or whether it's a review of some policies that we've had. So I kind of think that twofold: one, smaller committees as needed should be a little more autonomous with their times. And also, I think there should be a definite carve out with the board or the powers that be to actually present, when we have these policy changes or any kind of suggestions to the board.
Thank you, Michael. And I very much appreciate Michael's idea of more frequency with our interactions with the board so that we can both present, as Michael said, what some of our findings or questions or need for direction or request direction or resources or guidance from the board. So I think that's something that could help move the work more swiftly. Others from the oversight body. Cheryl.
I guess I'm trying to think this through. I'm listening to Miss Patrice because I'm agreeing with her, and I'm also agreeing with Christopher. I'm just trying to think this through because we all know how much work goes into these, especially with the subcommittee work, the small group work, and it can get a lot. But I'm also just trying to think through this part about. I mean, sometimes we we have to table things. And so I understand the want to carve out time to say, okay, so we're gonna stop it like right now. The meeting is gonna stop. I'm sorry, I'm back east, so it's 3:33 there right now. So what time the meeting? At 4? Okay. So you say, okay, so the meeting has to end at 4, so we're gonna stop it 3:30. In the last half an hour, we're gonna devote it to making decisions. It doesn't always work that way. And so I think that trying to force decision-making into a box is very difficult with bodies like this. It's the same thing with trying to force discussion only into a very set amount of time. We're gonna limit discussion to 15 minutes, and that's it. After 15 minutes, we can't have any more discussion. It doesn't work. And those of us who've been in these discussions on diversion and on data and on community engagement, we know this. So I think that because the conversations are so fluid, I mean, we could talk share sheriff oversight for days on end. And so it doesn't, and then still not quite have a consensus, which is what happened with the original task force body before we got to this oversight body. So I think that yes, there has to be something where we say we're going to vote on it, but there still has to be open, thoughtful dialogue where people feel that they've been heard on the committee, in the public, the community voice. And then you can get to the point where you say, okay, we've looked at the data, we've looked at the community voice, and now I think we're ready to start making recommendations to put forth from the committee to the oversight body to the board of supervisors. But I don't know about structuring meetings in such a way that we're putting people into a corner where every meeting, it has to have this component, because every meeting doesn't need that component. Does that make sense? Every meeting doesn't call for that. So I think that's the point of having a committee where the subject matter experts are the ones who are making that decision. So I'm just a little confused on what it is we're leaning towards. Maybe Michael can clear it up for me. He put his hand up.
You, Sheriff.
Okay, can I just respond? Okay, so maybe I wasn't clear. I apologize. So I guess I was talking about two separate things. One, I'm talking about when we're making a decision or discussing a policy like sheriff oversight, we still have our committees, our subcommittees that actually, let me make it more relevant. The diversion committee, how we were working on the list of factors for diversion and how we were doing that. That was done on a very small committee that was working on that. And I think that those committees should have the time to figure out how many times they need to meet, how frequent they should meet, and what time they need to allocate to make this, to get to work through this issue. The carve out that I was talking about was specifically with the board of supervisors, the powers that be. Once we have worked out, okay, we're gonna do this policy, now we take it to the board and we present it to the board, because right now there's this big hole. We just recommended last August, to have a sheriff's oversight board, and nothing's happened. I mean, I'm not going to say nothing's happened. I take that back, but there hasn't been one created, and it's kind of in the process. I don't know if they had questions for us. Did they want to dig deeper into this? Was there something that we could have did? If we had a carve out with them, a date or a meeting, specific meeting or a specific time during their meeting that we present our findings, our recommendations, that's what I meant for taking the time to specifically address what the body has found. So I hope I clarified a little bit.
Okay, I understand your point. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Michael. Gigi?
Yes, I fully support what Michael said. This is not a topic that I feel the board wants to talk about, so we have to put it on the agenda. And as a committee of the board, it would be our role to go back and say, we want to have regular updates about the progress being made and some of our recommendations. And so I'm in full agreement with Michael's suggestion. If we're going to get anything done, we're going to have to, you know, be a little bit more intentional about asking the board to hear the community voice around these subjects. Thanks.
Thank you, Gigi. Anyone else from the oversight body? All right, I'm going to move it to public comment. Public comment on this item.
Yeah, I have one other clarifying point here, and that's that there is a process that obviously the Board of Supervisors operate under. And so as we as a body have an opportunity to utilize that process to our advantage, but at the same time, the work of the body has to get worked through so that way you have something to actually present when the time comes where you could utilize that process, right, to then have whatever policy or suggestion you want to move forward. So I just want to lift that up, that I don't necessarily think that it is any, I can't agree with the sentiment that there is no desire to discuss some of these issues that are being raised by the Board of Supervisors when we've sat in PPC meetings where there's been enormous support of our job as a whole. However, the work that is trying to be accomplished needs time to actually be developed to then bring forth for consideration by the full board. And that can only be done if you utilize the process that's available to you. At the same time, our job has to be reflective of its own operations to figure out how should we work moving forward that is to our greatest benefit, given time constraints, given the recommendations you're trying to move forward, and what all the necessary steps that are required to then have something that's substantive to bring forth for the board to consider. So I just want to be sure that we kind of have that in the right context.
Thank you, Patrice. That's good context to have. And just dovetailing on that, the agenda, if you look in your chat, the agenda has been published for the Board of Supervisors meeting. We flagged for next week, and item D2 is the sheriff oversight item. So the folks that have discussed it here today should know that the full board will be discussing it next Tuesday, and you can read the agenda and report if you look in the chat. I see Carol's hand up with public comment.
Yes, it's me again. So I don't know if I'm missing something, but I thought that over the years, you know, this issue of sheriff oversight has been brought up to the board numerous times. And so some of the more conservative pro-law enforcement supervisors, you know, they're really opposed to the whole idea, and they've been fighting it, you know, it seemed like for a long time. And the whole thing about self-reporting, which is a big joke to me, it's laughable. That I don't know exactly where that came or who it came from, but that's not, that's just an insult to our intelligence. So I mean, and these meetings have been going on, and before the board was even, the oversight board was even formed, you know, or this group, you know, began doing all the work, and they're just going to be resistant, these certain supervisors. So we have to figure out ways around it, even though they're the final decision makers. But this has been going on, and they continue to resist. So.
Thank you, Carol. Any other public comment? Christopher?
Yeah, I'll just say, for the sake of time, that I appreciate Michael's original comments and his larger point that maybe at the subcommittee level, we can take up this issue about sort of what the structure or the cadence of subcommittee meetings is like, especially for the ones that may already be used to working with some smaller working groups, or may be able to form some around some of the big projects that they're working on right now. And that might be the best way to sort of put a button on this and try to get to the very crucial sort of upcoming agenda items there.
Thank you. So that having been said, and I don't see any additional hands, we're going to move to our last item, which is looking at upcoming term limit expiration. And Christopher, I think, is going to present on this. Is that right? Or Patrice? Anyone?
I guess I could throw my hat in there.
Right.
Yeah, so we do, so all of the 9 community representative seats will, their terms will be coming to an end at the end of this year. So all of those members have currently served out, would have served out then 2 full years. And we will plan to do a full fall recruitment of all 9 seats sometime next month. So the question before everyone is, one, for all of those who currently occupy those, that's not the best word, sit in those seats. If you have any intentions of applying again, that'll be good for us to know if you wish to serve again for another 2-year term. And then the second question here is about new member orientation materials and any supports that you feel we should be considering for new folks that would be coming on.
Thank you, Patrice. Christopher, did you have anything to add?
Sure. On the last point, just because we have some new members here, who've spoken to, things that maybe they weren't aware of or didn't know how, information that they, didn't know how to get a hold of. I would love to hear from any members, new or, OGs, so to speak, about what you think new members need to know. I mean, I already have, some things in mind to send you all, obviously, like a full copy of the recommendations, if not the full RJTF report that created this body and that gave it its charge, so that sort of what we're working on. The latest copy of the work plan would definitely be something that we need to share with you. Probably we did sort of a recap on progress earlier this year that I could also share with you all. And maybe a presentation from the presentation that went to the PPC earlier this year, based on the progress of last year. And in addition to those materials, I just want to be clear that I am 100% happy to make myself available to speak with any of you individually. I know we have 2 new members now. Speak with you individually, or if we can find time that works for both of you together to walk through these documents with you, I'm happy to do that as well. But in addition to those things, I'm curious about sort of what people feel like they need to know. And I'm curious from current members if there are anything that I'm missing, right? Any documents that should be provided or any other information that we should be emphasizing in that process.
Thanks, Christopher. All right, I'm going to go first to our job members on the points that Patrice raised about term limits and expiration, and if folks are interested in reapplying who are in those expiring seats. And I would say, for the sake of efficiency, maybe, Patrice, did you want a public discussion, or did you want folks who are interested in reapplying to just notify you through email or in the chat privately?
Actually, yeah, for the sake of time, this folks can certainly email me to let me know if they wish to reapply.
Thank you. And really also to Christopher's, to the discussion around new member orientation, I will just say, I feel strongly that there should be, you know, at least a minimum of 1 hour required new member orientation. There's a lot to catch up on, and I don't think any of us can be effective unless we have the proper background and context to move the work forward. So I would say, to the extent there are resources available and you're able to do that, Christopher, I thought the list was comprehensive that you presented, but really just having some time with folks so that you can catch them up on where we've been, let them know how the subcommittees work, sort of what the requirements are in terms of, and the needs in terms of attendance and participation, and kind of stepping up to take on some tasks sometimes outside of the hours that the body needs. I think that would be really helpful, but I do see Cheryl's hand now. We'll go to Cheryl.
Good. I got my hand up before Shayla, so I can say it before Shayla says it. I think that's a couple of things. And Tamisha has said this before, so Ms. Patrice, I think it may be helpful to send an email to everyone asking the same question you just asked right now, but maybe include in that email the thing that I know I've heard her say it, and I think that it's imperative because both she and Christopher have underscored this before. Everybody has a desire to serve. A lot of people do. We see it every time, you know, these openings come up, but the commitment that comes along with that service, the hours that Ms. Ellen just delineated, there's always excitement every year or every other year, or when there's an opening, and then it starts to dissipate when these meetings start coming around, and we sit here for 10 minutes trying to make quorum at the beginning of the meeting. So I think that answers both your question and Christopher's question. So it's not whether or not people want to continue to serve. Is, do you have the capacity, the willingness, and the want to dedicate to continue to serve and to make sure you attend the meetings, not just this quarterly meeting, but also the subcommittee meetings. I think that question has to be included in the do you plan to reapply, along with that application. And then Christopher, I think that's part of the information I think people need to know. The very real frustration that is expressed here in these meetings. I think that people who are just coming onto this oversight body who may not have been actively participating the past 6-7 years in the task force meetings, and so they don't see that this has been going on a very long time. And so this frustration has to be, this is a frustrating process because it's a government process. We can't just change things, and we have to work through how to change them. And so, yes, we are working to hold them up, to hold everyone accountable, but there is a process. And so you'll hear Ms. Jill pop in every once in a while to say something about that process. And you'll hear Ms. Patrice pop in, or you'll hear Melvin pop in, or you'll hear, you know, someone from probation, or even the sheriff's office or the DA's office pop in and say, or Miss Ellen herself, that sounds good, but let me tell you some of the legal things that we run into trying to do that. So I think that pointing that out, Christopher, is really, really important, so that people don't lose the fervor and the hope and the enthusiasm that brings them to the oversight body, but they also know the reality that we're facing in these systems, right? And that is where I think that we that's missing in paperwork. It's hard to document that in black and white. Daisy. Okay, Shayla.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Miss Cheryl, I think you just reading my mind. I'm a semi-OG, but I have said in like other spaces, so like on the community advisory board, and you hit the nail on the head, like capacity wise. It's just not attending the quarterly meetings, but there's also other capacities that you have to do within the subcommittees. So I know, and I've seen it in other spaces too, like CAB, where we ask that question, like, do you have the time and commitment to hold this seat? And folks are on board, but then they like halfway through they leave. So I do want to highlight that. And then the other thing too, Chris, is what was helpful for me is also knowing the rules and guidelines as far as like the Brown Act. I know we do a training on that and we go through it, but I don't think we like go into discussion. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because when we had the community forum, I think we called it something else, but when we had the community forum, we were like, well, we don't want to violate any of these acts. So just knowing that, I think will be a great benefit as well.
Thanks, Shayla. That's a really good point about the Brown Act, which does impose requirements on members. Gigi?
Yeah, I guess what's most important to me is what has been accomplished. What had this committee accomplished? Because we all are committed, I think, to this effort because it's something important to us. And when attention wanes, it's because people feel like they're wasting their time. So if you guys have a list of accomplishments since this office was put in place, since this board was put in place, what have you accomplished that has improved outcomes for residents of this county around not being criminalized based on their skin color? Thanks.
Thank you, Gigi. Jeff?
Thanks. In response to what Gigi was just saying, and in general about orientation, there's no shortcut, but for my money, the agenda packets and the record of actions are really where a lot of it is at, because people give their summary of what we said, or this was really what we intended, but that's the bottom line with it. So like when I go back to where are we with the sheriff campaign and oversight, I'm just taking those bits and pieces from the record of actions and said, this is what we said. It's not what I think it was or otherwise. That's the Cliff Notes. And I feel like it makes it all worthwhile, these conversations, the contributions we have and the votes, because it's memorialized there. And that takes a lot of time of digging. But in terms of where are we on any given point, I invest my time there in preparing for these meetings to look at those record of actions and the agenda packets and the attachments, because it's unimpeachable, right? That information was out there for everybody. We all saw it. We all agreed upon it on a vote, and we voted to say it was clear. So that's where I see it. Our real progress or lack thereof is in those.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that's a great point, and especially for new members. So even the orientation could be, showing folks how to find those and how to interpret them, I think sometimes can be a barrier. So I think those are great points. And if you look in the chat, thank you, Patrice, for updating it with the last year's update on our job work that was presented at the February 2022 PPC meeting. So that would be a helpful document for new members and members of the public and current members of the RJOB to review. And I don't see other members of the body, but I do see at least one member of the public. So Elsa.
Thank you, Cheryl, for really helping us smell the coffee. I belong to a lot of organizations, and in my retirement, I'm working harder than I've ever worked in my life. I'm a volunteer. I care. There's no way I would join your body because you're trying to accomplish the impossible with nothing but pushback. And my hat goes off to you, but there's no way that I would try to join you. Thank you for being honest.
Thank you. All right, well, I am pleased to say, I think we're going to wrap up a little ahead of schedule. We are just those precious 2 minutes. Our next quarterly meeting is going to be November 3rd at 1 o'clock. There will be so many opportunities to attend the diversion subcommittee, the data subcommittee, and the community engagement and funding subcommittee meeting in the interim. And then, of course, the board meeting where the racial justice, the sheriff's oversight issue will be addressed on Tuesday. So I would encourage folks to subscribe to the agendas on the county's website, because that'll really help you get those automatic notifications every week. And I just want to really appreciate the perseverance and dedication of folks sticking with it and taking on these sort of procedural issues that are really going to help us make a difference in our work if we can get them right and ensure that we are being as efficient and productive and effective with our work, so that we're meeting as frequently as we can and moving things forward. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.